Hey guys, so today I'm going to be finishing off this book talk with the ending of Looking for Alaska. And to get right to it, and to start right where we left off, the Colonel and Pudge started to get everyone back together. This meant Takami and Laura. And during this time, they also decided to stall their investigation. Now, this was a big deal because this was almost letting go and letting almost their memory of Alaska go. And this was all in memory of Alaska, just how many traditions have people sacrifice objects to the deceased. This was one of them. Second, in memory of Alaska, the Colonel decided to put into play a prank that Alaska had planned beforehand. They were going to save it for their senior year, but now seemed just as good a time as any. Now, the prank was for a speech day where the junior and senior classes picked a speaker to present to the entire school. And the plan was to get someone to talk about sexual deviancy in adolescence. And they did this by hiring an actual sexual deviant, aka a male stripper. And this was both in point two, making a joke by having a stripper stripped down in front of the entire school, teachers, students, and faculty, but also because Alaska was a well-known feminist in the school, and her thing was about backing women up forever, and this was one of the ways of doing it. After this prank, the group made little progress and finally decided to call it quits on the investigation. But before they totally went go, they decided to finally drive through where Alaska died, and the place where she died. And in the book, it reads, 5 miles north of school, the Colonel moved into the left lane of the interstate and began to accelerate. I gritted my teeth, and then before us, broken glass shattered in the glare of the sun like the road was wearing jewelry. And that spot must be the spot. He was still accelerating. I thought, this would not be a bad way to go. I thought, straight and fast. Maybe she just decided at the last second. And poof. We were through the moment of her death. We are driving through the place that she can never drive through, passing onto asphalt she never saw. And we are not dead. We are not dead. We are breathing and we are crying, and now slowing down and moving back into the right lane. We got off at the next exit, quietly, and switching drivers, we walked in front of the car. We met and I held him, my hands balled into tight fists around his shoulders, and he wrapped his short arms around me and squeezed tight, so that I felt the heaves of his chest as we realized over and over again that we were still alive. I realized it in waves, and we held on to each other crying, and I thought, God, we must look so lame. But it doesn't much matter when you have just now realized, all that time later, that you are still alive. And they did this for a sense of closure, and they got it. They realized that they couldn't do anything about Alaska's death. This was a mystery that couldn't be solved. As Pudge says, we gave up. I finally had enough of chasing after a ghost who did not want to be discovered. We'd failed, maybe, but some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. I still did not know her as well as I wanted to, but I never could. This is showing that Pudge came to the closure that he would never be able to know Alaska like he wanted to, and that he would never solve what happened to Alaska. And finally, in the end of the book, Takami wrote a letter to Pudge and the Colonel just before he left for Japan. It read that he knew about Alaska and that Alaska visited him in her final moments just before she came crashing into Pudge and the Colonel's dorm as they let her go. And this was meant to show that Takami had also let her go. That he also had the chance to stop her from going to her mother's grave and placing flowers there on her anniversary of her death, January 10th. And Takami felt the same things that Pudge and the Colonel did, and was almost just as guilty as Pudge and the Colonel. And to close off this week of videos, I am going to read to you what Pudge wrote for his history paper for the final term. And the question was, how will we ever get out of this labyrinth of suffering? Before I got here, I thought for a long time that the way out of the labyrinth was to pretend like it did not exist, to build a small self-sufficient world in the back corner of the endless maze, and to pretend that I was not lost, but home. But that only led to a lonely life accompanied only by the last words of the already dead. So I came here looking for a great perhaps, for real friends in a more than minor life. And then I screwed up, and the Colonel screwed up, and Takami screwed up. and she slipped through our fingers, and there's no sugarcoating it. She deserved better friends. When she effed up all those years ago, just a little girl terrified into paralysis, she collapsed into the enigma of herself, and I could have done that. But I saw where it led for her. So I still believe in the great perhaps, and I can believe in it in spite of having lost her. But I will forget her, yes. That which came together will fall apart imperceptibly slowly, and I will forget, but she will forgive my forgetting. Just as I forgave her for forgetting me and the Colonel and everyone but herself and her mom in those last moments she spent as a person. I know now that she forgives me for being dumb and scared and doing the dumb and scared thing. I know she forgives me just as her mother forgives her, and here's how I know. I thought at first that she was just dead, just darkness, just a body being eaten by bugs. I thought about her a lot like that, as something's meal. What was her? Green eyes, half a smirk, and soft curves of her legs would soon be nothing, just the bones I never saw. I thought about the slow process of becoming bone and then fossil and then coal that will, in millions of years, be mined by humans of the future, and how they would heat their homes with her, and then she would be a smoke billowing out of the smokestack, coating the atmosphere. I still think that sometimes. Think that maybe the afterlife is just something we make up to erase, just to ease the pain of loss, to make our time in the labyrinth bearable. Maybe she was just matter, and matter just gets recycled. But ultimately, I do not believe that she was only matter. The rest of her must be recycled too. I believe now that we are greater than the sum of our parts. If you take Alaska's genetic code, and you add her life experience to the relationships we had with people, and then you take the size and shape of her body, you do not get her. There is something else entirely. There is a part of her greater than the sum of her noble parts, and that part has to go somewhere, because it cannot be destroyed. Although no one will ever accuse me of being much of a science student, one thing I learned from science classes is that energy is never created and never destroyed. And if Alaska took her own life, that is the hope I wish I could have forgiven her. Forgetting her mother, failing her mother and her friends and herself, those are awful things. But she did not need to fold into herself and self-destruct. Those awful things are survivable, because we are as indestructible as we believe ourselves to be. When adults say teenagers think they are invincible with that sly, stupid smile on their faces, they don't know how right they are. We need never be hopeless, because we can never be irreparably broken. We think that we are invincible because we are. We cannot be born and we cannot die. Like all energy, we can only change shapes and sizes and manifestations. They forget that when they are old. They get scared of losing and failing. But that part of us is greater than the sum of our parts, cannot begin and not end, and so cannot fail. So I know that she forgives me, just as I forgive her. Thomas Edison's last words were, "It's very beautiful over there." I don't know where there is, but I believe it's somewhere, and I hope it's beautiful. Thank you for watching, and well, I hope you had a great week.